Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the breakout players on the defensive side of the ball for 2024, but now it's time for Hot Take Thursday, and this one I feel like people are starting to come around on. I'm not sure if that's the case, but I feel like people are starting to understand where some of us are coming from when we say this. First of all, I want to start with this is in no way Nick Saban's fault. Nick Saban has nothing to worry about in terms of how other coaches are viewed or how other coaches are expected to perform. He was just doing his job, and he happened to be the best we've ever seen at doing that job. So he's someone that set the bar insanely high, and it's created something of a trend in this sport where if certain guys, don't break through the first couple of times they're in the playoff or don't win a title in their first couple of years, they start getting unfair reputations. Let's put it that way. Saban's run with Bama was something I've never seen. Obviously, it essentially took up my entire life, and it's something that a lot of us have never seen. It's something that we probably won't see at least soon, ever again, or maybe ever again. So it's something that we need to treat that way, right? Obviously, when we talk about other sports, this happens all the time. NFL quarterbacks should not be compared to Patrick Mahomes because Patrick Mahomes is insane, maybe one of the best to ever do it. So we shouldn't be comparing the average NFL quarterback to Patrick Mahomes because obviously he's not going to be nearly as good. Baseball players shouldn't be compared to Shohei Ohtani because not everyone can hit and pitch not everyone can do that in the same game. Not every soccer player should be compared to Messi or Ronaldo. I'm not going to get involved with that argument. Whichever one you like is the one that they shouldn't be compared to. So essentially my point is we have tons of variability in every single sport, whether it's in the players or the coaches or the games or just the level of play. And the way that we should be judging the reality of the sport is by the mean of that sport or the mean of the player in that sport. So with NFL quarterbacks, whoever you want to say the mean is, I'm not necessarily going to get called into calling someone mid or calling someone not as good as everyone else. But in general, the way that we should disclose or the way that we should rank these people or show that who they are, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, is not based off the best among us, is the best way to put it. So I think there was this idea that Nick Saban was doing something that was totally replicable and everyone could do it and everyone was just too lazy or just didn't have the talent or whatever it is. It's insane that he was able to do what he did. It's insane that Kirby Smart was able to go back to back. That doesn't make much sense in the college world that we live in today. So, it's wild what Nick Saban was able to do, and it should be treated that way, as an anomaly, as someone that is so far above what we thought was possible and what we thought, what everyone else was at the time. So, it's very interesting to hear people talk about the current coaching landscape because when I hear Ryan Day's name or Brian Kelly's name, those have been the two biggest victims I've seen, at least recently, of this kind of mentality that we've kind of has permeated into the college football world. But when you look at active coaches, there's only three that have won titles: Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, and then Mac Brown. And I would argue that no one is putting Mac Brown on the same level of those other two guys. I don't think they're putting Mac Brown above Kalen DeBoer or Steve Sarkisian or Mike Norvell. The list could go on. Mac Brown is a fantastic coach and obviously etched his name into history in 2005 with Texas and Vince Young. But at the end of the day, winning a title doesn't necessarily automatically mean you are the best coach. The same way not winning a title doesn't necessarily mean you're not among the best coaches in the country. So this one is going to be, it's a little bit tough because I think there's a lot of people that would argue, if you're the elite of the elite and you've been there a number of times, like Lincoln Riley is a great example, been to the playoff, I believe 4 times, is 0-4 in those times that he's gone. And people immediately said, oh, so he can't win the big one. He's not capable of winning that game. He just doesn't have the chops, or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, he's a play away in that Rose Bowl game against Georgia. Obviously, came out on the wrong side, but was very close to winning that game. Ran into an absolute buzzsaw in 2019 that we don't need to talk about in LSU. But the reality is this game is really, really hard. And winning a ton of games is really, really hard. The same way when people talk about Mike Norvell and Florida State last season, they say, well, you got taken to the woodshed in the Orange Bowl, so the entire year doesn't matter. Winning 13 games in a row, especially with some of the things they had to deal with, is remarkable, and it should be dealt with that way, and it shouldn't be just the final result defines the entire season, because that's a very dangerous proposition for every coach but the guy that wins the title. So I think there's this kind of mentality, especially surrounding Ryan Day, Brian Kelly, and Lincoln Riley, where they haven't done it, so people think they can't do it, or people think that it's just not possible, they don't have the ability. Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and all of these people are just a cut above or whatever. And that's never really been the case. These guys have missed by inches a number of different times. Ryan Day obviously has been there a couple of different times, was in the title game one time, and things just didn't go his way. And a lot of this game has to do with a lot of things that honestly coaches can't really control, whether that's bounce of ball plays or, turnovers, penalties that they have no control over, certain things that they just can't fully control on game day. So these games are, decided by inches, they're decided by centimeters, really. And if we define all of these coaches by the greatest coach of all time, they're all not good. That's really the reality. Kirby Smart, even, a guy that's won back-to-back titles and was very close to trying to get a three-peat a year ago, is not great compared to Nick Saban, because Nick Saban has 7 of them, and he has beaten Kirby Smart a number of times on very big stages and has done incredible things. And Kirby Smart is the next incredible coach and could honestly develop a Saban-type legacy, a Alabama and Saban-type legacy at Georgia. But at the end of the day, it would be remarkable if he was able to pull that off. It's way more likely that he maybe wins one more, maybe he doesn't win any more, and he kind of just is a really good coach for the rest of his career but never breaks through again, because that's the reality of this sport. It's a lot about just what day you fall on and how your team is feeling and how they play on that specific day. So guys like Brian Kelly especially is at the very top of this game. He has had double-digit win seasons pretty much every year as he's been a head coach. He's been a big part of a lot of teams that have been to championships. I mean, the 2012 Notre Dame team is the obvious one that got taken to the woodshed by Alabama, but at the end of the day got there. Ryan Day, another one that has been in that game but just couldn't break through. Lincoln Riley, Kalen DeBoer, Steve Sarkisian, Mike Norvell, all of these guys are fantastic coaches. They have done incredible things at all of their programs. Obviously, Brian Kelly, Ryan Day, and Lincoln Riley have been doing it a little bit longer than the other 3 and have a little bit more under their belt, but all of those guys are remarkable coaches. And if you put their resume up against Nick Saban, it looks like nothingness, right? It looks like they don't know how to coach, or they aren't remotely on the same level, and it's because they aren't. So it's kind of just this overarching thought in college football that you hire a coach, and if in 3 years it doesn't look the way you want it to look, you kick him to the curb and you start back over. I've seen that, a number of times. I have been a Texas fan for a majority of my life, and the majority of my life was involved in flipping over coaches very often, and the Charlie Strong to Tom Herman to Steve Sarkisian. So there's been a lot of that kind of mentality and that kind of thought process. And not that you shouldn't judge these coaches early on in their tenure, not that these coaches are totally scot-free for the first 3 or 4 years of their contract by any means, but we have to give guys a chance to build what they want to build. Building a program is incredibly hard. We saw what Steve Sarkisian inherited at Texas. We saw what Mario Cristobal inherited at Miami, and the real rebuild process is really hard to pull off. It's really hard from a personnel standpoint. It's hard from a staff standpoint. And especially with all of the different things happening in college football, it's incredibly hard. So all of these coaches have done remarkable things, and yeah, they don't have the trophy on the shelf. They don't have the national title on the shelf. They don't necessarily have the big-time thing that they've all been looking for. But at the end of the day, one of the big-time hurdles for that, Nick Saban has gotten out of the way. The two guys that have gotten to multiple titles during this time are Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney. I had them 1 and 2 in my coaches rankings for that reason, because winning titles during this era has been something that is not easy to do remotely, and those guys in particular had to go through Saban to do it in a lot of instances. So I think those guys obviously deserve the utmost respect and are at the very top of this sport, but the second group is still a remarkable group of coaches and a remarkable group of developers and decision makers and do incredible things. But there's been an Achilles heel, and as we all have seen, a lot of the time, it's been the defensive side of the ball. Last year, Brian Kelly had Jaden Daniels on his team. He was one of the most electric players in the country. The Heisman winner did incredible things, and likely if they had a defense that was even top 50, they're probably in the playoff. They're probably at least giving themselves a shot at a national title. But bad defense got in their way. Lincoln Riley, bad defense got in his way pretty much every which way from Tuesday while he was at OU and even in 2022 at USC. So all of these guys, Ryan Day, same thing. Some of these bad defenses have gotten his way. In that Ohio State-Georgia game that was such a classic a couple of years ago, that defense got torched in the fourth quarter, let's be honest. Stetson Bennett essentially completed every single pass he had. But all of those guys are trying to fix that problem. All of those guys have taken big-time strides. Hiring a new DC has been the biggest thing that Ohio State has done. Hiring Jim Knowles has been a huge thing for their program, and I think will continue to be. Hiring Blake Baker at LSU for Brian Kelly is a huge hire that I think will change the direction of his program. DeAnton Lynn being hired at USC from UCLA, another big-time hire, and Lincoln Riley is really under it because he has a entire culture really to flip over there at USC, because there's a certain level of toughness that they need to be playing with that they're not playing with right now. So my point is, in all of this, I know that was a little bit rambling and kind of all over the place. I apologize for that. But the reality is, when these guys get hired and they say they want to win titles and they say they want to do X, Y, and Z and do remarkable things at your school, and it takes them some time, just be a little bit more patient. Be a little bit more realistic about where your school stands, where your roster stands, and especially remind yourself that this guy is not Nick Saban. This guy is not, the best coach of all time, and maybe he is. Maybe he'll end up being Nick Saban, but even Nick Saban took until I think year 6 or 7 of being a head coach to win that first title. So these things take time. All of this development as a coach takes incredible amounts of time, but building a program even takes time. Building out a roster takes time. So essentially just give them a little bit of chance to breathe. Give them expectations that make sense for the short term. Miami is a huge problem area for this. People saying Mario Cristobal has fallen on his face when in reality he's probably right on schedule with what he had planned, but that's a topic for another time. I think allowing these coaches to execute what they want without this massive weight on their shoulders that they might get fired if they don't deliver by year 2 or year 3 is something that will open the door for so many great coaches to realize their full potential and be the incredible coaches that they're capable of being. But right now there are a lot of worried faces, I'm sure, across pretty much every football program, because this is a pretty cutthroat business. And I think if we just allowed them a little bit more grace, then you would see a lot more coaches be successful, a lot more programs be happy that they waited, and possibly a lot more players not bouncing around as much, because there isn't this crazy coaching carousel every 2 seconds of every day. So it's a very interesting concept. Obviously, we've saw Nick Saban's essentially his death march through college football over the last decade or so, and it's over now. So can we just look at again the expectations that we have for coaches going forward? And now that he's out of the room, can we just regroup, understand that not every coach is Nick Saban, and move forward from there? But that will do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. It means a whole lot to us. And then we also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for all of the content and updates. Obviously, this time is March Madness time, so my guy Nelson over on the basketball podcast will get you taken care of there. But tons of people covering every single sport you could think of, so definitely follow on all of the pages there. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow with a very special guest.